So the new moon in Scorpio is tomorrow. And this new moon coincides with today, Diwali, this festival of lights celebrated in the Hindu tradition and the beginning of their new year. And so I want to bring through the theme of light, because when we hit a new moon, it is the darkest time. It is the fertile void. And we are lit up by our inner light. And so that's a theme that we get to remember today, to follow our inner light. I drew a card from the White Light Oracle deck, which I often do. I've been super lit up about Alana Fairchilds. I see people shaking their head. Yes. And I got Aurora of Gamma. She is stunning. Check her out. Can you see her? Look how beautiful she is. And she comes with a message. And this message is the message of the new moon, because our new moon is in Scorpio. And if your life hasn't been turned upside down through the Scorpio depth, the waters of the depth, then perhaps you got a hall pass. But most of us have not gotten a hall pass. We have had to enter into the depth, because we know that to ascend requires us to descend, to go deeper inward, and to lock in to that inner light, and to lock into the inner truth, and to become devoted to the inner truth above all else. This has certainly been my lesson. And this is what Aurora of Gamma says. And take this to heart. It is time to let go of what has been. You are swiftly outgrowing your past. Explore and commit to a spiritual practice that supports your personal transformation, so that you can cross the threshold before you now. Embrace your freedom to be creative in your approach, rather than doggedly committing yourself to the previous ideas or plans. You have the spiritual intelligence necessary to evolve. Continue your healing journey with a trust that a positive outcome is imminent. And she activates these gamma waves. These gamma waves are these waves of really spiritual knowing. And so on this day of Diwali, we open up the portal of Lakshmi energy, the portal of prosperity. And that portal of prosperity is a reflection of the inner light. Remember last week we talked about creativity. And this week, gene key 43, the sun is shining on gene key 43, which is in the I Ching, the hexagram of breakthrough. So you can see all these pieces conspiring together today to support your breakthrough. Now, this breakthrough in the I Ching is collective, and it's what we're all a stand for. We wouldn't be here if we were not geared toward the bigger picture, why we're doing what we're doing, what we're standing for in humanity to happen. So the shadow of gene key 43 is deafness. And deafness is not really that there's no sound. Deafness is that there's so much noise that you can't hear yourself speak. It's that you're so worried and so caught up in the external that you can't hear yourself speak. Now, Scorpio, one of the things I learned from Molly McCord, the astrologer that I like to weave in here along with Pam Gregory, she brought this out, that Scorpio is a fixed water sign. What is fixed water? It's a freaking ice cube. It's frozen. So much of us have had to go through some frozen fear as we tread into the depth of the waters that have been shown to us to take a good, hard look at. What are the things that we've had to reassess? What are the things that we've had to let go of? We've been through some incredible eclipses. And then we've had Mars in Scorpio. We've had Pluto retrograde, squaring the nodes, our future, our past. I mean, the whole setup in the geometry has been this squeeze. And so if you've ever had a baby, you know that the contraction is that a very pulse, that very movement that's necessary in order to birth that baby. And that's the same thing with our creative projects, with our dharma, with our work in the world. Gene Key 43 says, stop. Stop the noise. Stop putting your attention on the noise. Stop putting your attention on your worries. Stop putting your attention on the external fixations and come to the light within. Quiet yourself. So ask yourself, what are the things that are necessary for a breakthrough? Because we know that all collective breakthrough is a bunch of individual breakthroughs. And this is what's happening as I get into these communities. And over the last few days, I have been in the conversation of divine feminine businesses, of coaches and healers, through Sovereign CEO and through the business masterclass, and talking to so many people for hours about this very topic of what they're called to do. And I can tell you that the field is becoming sophisticated. We are getting it. Our conversation is elevated to a place that it wasn't even 2 years ago. So we are getting it. We are in the midst of it. So if there was ever a doubt in your mind, shift your drishti and realize that it's happening, and it's happening through you. Just take stock of the ways that you have changed. And so when we ask ourselves, what are the conditions of a breakthrough? And this is the setup for this new moon. This new moon has very eclipse energy to it. It's not going to be this portal that feels like butter. It might be a portal that feels like your head gets underneath the ocean and you're just coming up to breathe. But there's an epiphany that gets to happen. And that's what Gene Key 43 puts us on the road. If we wake up and we're not deaf and we're not listening to the wrong things that deafen out our inner voice, then we get insight. That's the gift frequency of Gene Key 43. And then insight leads to epiphany. But this epiphany comes at a price. And this is something I want to presence, because we don't talk about the price that we have to pay, the sacrifice that gets to be made. There are always small sacrifices for the big picture, for the thing that you're going for. And so the conditions of breakthrough require these small sacrifices. And typically these sacrifices are ego-based sacrifices. They're not sacrificing your true desire. They're not sacrificing your inner creativity. They're not sacrificing or compromising having it all. They're actually, no. The place that's asking you to sacrifice is the place where you hold unforgiveness. It's the place where you hold judgment, even against yourself. It's the place where you have rackets going on, which are these fronts that operate as stories that keep you from really knowing your inner power. It's this story of, I'm so busy. Can we relate to that? I'm just so busy that I can't fill in the blank. It's that kind of a sacrifice. Because you are constantly, I am constantly, we are constantly at choice. And so one of the things that we often get afraid to do is be responsible for the choices we're making. So the conditions of breakthrough require responsibility. They require that you look that thing square in the eye and say, okay, I'm going to make a new choice. It requires that you get complete with the ways that you may have be holding things against other people or against yourself. Those are the sacrifices that we get to burn into the fire as we light the holy fire on Diwali, this festival of lights, getting ready for this new moon. Let's burn into the fire, as Aurora de Gama says, anything from the past. I'm really getting this download. You know, we've been saying this for 2 or 3 years, that we have to leave the past behind. And yet I'm noticing in myself the ways that I cling to the old way because it's what I know. And Gene Key 43 says your biggest obstacle is that you can't handle uncertainty. Yeah, it's true. So we grip, we make stories, we hold on to the past. Well, that's how I made money before. That's what I did before. That's how we do it. Instead of aligning with an inner truth. And the message to me has come over and over and over again is that that frozen fear is really because we can't do that anymore. We're going to have to take the leap of faith into the uncertainty. And that leap of faith it's not blind. It's actually connected deeply to an inner truth. That when we have ears to hear, when we're not deaf, when we're not worried and focused on the external of this is how it's done, when we really have the courage to follow our inner creativity, that's where the prosperity comes. And there's a new normal for prosperity. Because part of the evolutionary movement is to move us out of these old structures and these old systems. And so they're just not going to freaking work anymore. You know, the right angle cross of planning in human design is coming to an end in 2027. There will be no more people who are born with that right angle cross. And that right angle cross of planning was responsible for the structures that were built around our healthcare, our government, our family systems, our banking, all the things that we needed to do as a tribe to make it work. And it's just done. So we have until now in 2027 to really ignite this creative spark. And we talked about this last week, that Ra says after 2027, we really won't be having the conversation of what is our authentic purpose? Who is my authentic self? I feel like that's really fascinating because it feels like it's so much in the water right now. But what it tells me is that we're going to get it. We're really going to get it. We're going to be living it. So over the next 3-4 years, we're going to live our authentic truth. And that's really where the new moon in Scorpio opens up a new portal. And this portal is the portal of prosperity. And it requires the inner creativity. So the gift of insight in the gene keys is the creative rebel. This is what Richard Rudd calls it. And the reason why he calls it the creative rebel is because there's an inner allegiance to the inner light, to the fire within, and giving that fire within voice. And it certainly doesn't mean that we don't have coaches and healers, because we're going to have a lot of them, because this is new territory for us. And listening on the inside is new for us. We've been so conditioned that religion and government tell us who we are and tell us the matrix, the game that we get to play in and how we get to play the game. So what if all of those things are complete? They're not wrong, they're just complete. What if a new normal is happening? But this new normal is seeded through your inner fire, your creativity. That was Gene Key 1 last week, the inner fire. And Gene Key 43 is taking that inner fire and moving it into the world and becoming that. So we'll go back to what are the conditions of breakthrough? And these are important things to presence, because 43 in the shadow frequency keeps us from seeing these things. It keeps us from a breakthrough. It keeps us cycling in the same old, same old. And if you find yourself in that place of spinning, same old, all you need to do is the touchstone of your inner truth. So the breakthrough requires gaps and pauses. It requires some silence. As Gene Key 43 says, become deaf to everything other than the divine. It requires white space. Because think about it, we haven't been conditioned to listen and follow our truths. Many of the children being raised now, especially when they're being raised by you, are being conditioned to follow their truth. But if you were like my upbringing, I was never asked what my truth was. I was never asked how that felt exactly, right? No. We were just told, this is what you need to do. This is what you need to believe. And so the conditions of a breakthrough include contemplation. And we're going to go into a little bit of that today with our new moon activation. They include, the conditions of breakthrough include really breaking up with this need to know. And I know a lot of divine feminine women are getting more and more comfortable in uncertainty. And really, we have to work yogas in that, right? Because the equal and opposite is always true as well. So I love when Oprah wrote this column and she's like, what I know. And sometimes I come back to that. What do I know? What do I actually know in this moment? Because that is the seed of where to start. And do I know how it's all going to happen? Do I know? No, I don't know. And there's ways to set ourselves up. Like one of the things I was hearing today as I was working with these divine feminine women who are stepping into their business is that if you're not making offers, then you're not selling. And if you're not selling, you're not making money. So there is a system and there is a structure. Yes, we're not saying don't have that. And we're also saying, listen, be open to that creative flow. So that structure should really support that flow. They should go hand in hand because we live in polarity. It's a both and conversation. And for too long, we have put ourselves in the way of following the exterior, looking outside of us for validation, looking outside of us for our path. And today we're reclaiming that. There's a couple more things about the conditions of breakthrough, and that is, I wrote down witness, the witness. Start by being the witness inside yourself of that still small voice that's saying, how about if you do this? How about if you do this? The conversation you really want to be in is this. It also begins with a calm inner environment, an inner relaxation. So when you can allow yourself to relax, you can receive the spiritual insight that you need to receive to make a step, to make a move. So Gene Key 43 is the voice of embracing unpredictability. And again, this is paired with, it's funny because the programming partner is 23, and in human design, the channel 4323 is the freak, the genius. So 43 is in the ajna, it's in the mind. So you can tell now where the battle is, it's in the mind. And 23, some of you have this channel, 23 is in the throat. So it's taking these insights and the ability to articulate them into the world. But they have their programming partners. So 43, the opposite is 23, and they float on an axis of knowing and not knowing. Everything floats on an axis, and 43 is highlighting that there are times when we don't know. And we have to surrender. And we have to embrace unpredictability. And so what are the conditions that allow you to embrace unpredictability? What are the conditions that allow you to take a leap of faith? Some of those conditions are that you're resourced. You're deeply resourced on the inside. That your faith has moved from the outside to the inside. One of my favorite books around abundance is the Abundance Book from John Randolph Price. And I want to read one of the, I'll read one of the 10 just to highlight this exact point. So there are 10 statements, and you repeat them every 10 days for 40 days. And one of the statements is, I am conscious of the inner presence as my lavish abundance. I am conscious of the inner presence as my lavish abundance. I am conscious of the constant activity of the mind of this infinite prosperity. This is divine mind. Therefore, my consciousness is filled with the light of truth. And what we know is that your money is a reflection of your awareness. And when your awareness is on the inner game, the inner prosperity, then you are an experience of lavish abundance. You are the experience of lavish abundance. And so on this Diwali day, Diwali is known as welcoming Lakshmi, the goddess of prosperity, into our lives. So we get to do that on our sisterhood activation. We're going to do a couple things for the new moon on our sisterhood activation. But let me conclude with the gift of 43 is to awaken us to our inner listening. And sometimes your inner listening is going to sound crazy. It's going to buck the system. maybe it's not fully formed, but you know that there's some inner spark right there. And so when we get into the habit of following that, of surrendering to and dying to, sacrificing that part of the ego that needs to know or that needs to be accepted, because again, this gene key deals with a very deep shadow of the fear of rejection. As tribal people, if we did stuff that the tribe didn't like, we were just left out in the desert and they were like, bye-bye. And there was no way to survive without a tribe. So our human brain got really good at looking at other people and sussing out what do they want from us, what's accepted in this tribe, what's not accepted in this tribe. I've been reading deeply the story, the many stories of Mary Magdalene and the retelling of the story of Yeshua. And I'm constantly struck by the overlay of the conditioning of society, of the politics that were blocking the message of pure love from coming through. So we're going to be asked to do some pretty radical things. Your inner rebel is going to be ignited. If she isn't already, I think it's just going to happen more. But this is how we enter into the ring of destiny. It is our destiny to evolve. And we have choice in that destiny. We always have choice. What timeline will we choose? The highest timeline is associated with the inner truth. You're not bad or wrong for anything else, but the highest timeline is connected to your inner truth. So let's rub our hands together and gather all the positive energy that we have generated here. And let's beam it out to the world. This is a message of light to the world. This is a message of love to the world. This is a message of freedom to the world. It's terrifying and it's beautiful. And so we take our time together as light workers and healers, and we dedicate this to the merits. May all beings benefit from the merits of our efforts. Namaste.